explain the top 18 attacking concepts that you must know before you play your next game and you launch the next attack. Principle number 1, don't launch an attack if you don't have a lead in development. Do not rush. In this opening, if you go e4, e5, bishop c4, knight c6, you don't have a lead in development. He developed a piece, you did as well, and you're thinking, okay, this bishop sacrifice may work, but he's gonna take, because you saw, for instance, that you put the queen out, and you're checking the king. But that's not enough. Attacking with just a queen in chess is never gonna yield positive results, because all your opponent has to do is just push the pawn. Yes, you have another check, and beginners love to give checks. But now he develops another piece, and look at your position. He's totally losing. You sacrificed a bishop to get in this position. He has 2 knights out, and he's just gonna do this. The rook is gonna come here. He's gonna hide with the king, and you're gonna be losing this game. So do not rush. If you don't have a lead in development, don't sacrifice pieces, don't launch an attack. Concept number 2. If you have a lead in development, and your opponent's king is in the center, like in this opening, for instance, and you're playing with the black pieces. You take, now he took, which is a mistake. You take with the bishop. So his king is in the center. He hasn't castled yet. You have an amazing bishop diagonal. His pieces haven't been developed properly here. In this kind of situation, you can consider to sacrifice a piece, because when he takes, now you have a check. The king is forced to move. And now you come with the knight here, and we're exploiting the fact that the king is in the center. This knight is attacking the queen. The queen cannot come here because of the pawn. So the queen is forced to come on this square, and it's hard to believe. Yes, this is a check, but you just have to cover with the bishop. Where is this queen going? The only square would be this one, but then there is a check, and you win the queen. Or if the queen goes here, is the same thing. The knight here is a check, a fork, and you're winning the queen. And the only reason why this happened is because white neglected development. Here, they went knight bd2. They should have played bishop g2, followed by castle and putting their king safe. The third concept is do not put pressure on your opponent's pawn if your king is still in the center and you don't have a lead in development. Because, for instance, here, he's gonna castle. Now you're gonna take the pawn, and as you can see, is a blunder, because he can take, and when you take back, he's using the fact that you're underdeveloped, and he's gonna play this, attacking both rooks, and you lose the game this way. And I'm sure it happened to you many times, right? The concept number 4 is crucial, and I see a lot of people making this mistake. You have to launch an attack for the right reasons, because the position asks for it, not because you're trying to avoid material loss. Here, for instance, white played knight d5, he took, the pawn took, and now black most likely realized moving this knight would result in the loss of a pawn. So instead, black decided to push themselves, thinking if he takes, I'm gonna take his knight. So the reason why black started an attack, pushing this pawn in the center, is because they thought, okay, maybe that's the only way to avoid losing material. But it turns out this kind of scenarios happens. White is gonna take the pawn, you're gonna take the knight, and now queen b3, and it turns out that here, black is losing a piece, because this is attacked, and if you move him somewhere, then I can just take and attacking 2 pieces, and I win a piece this way. So next time you attack for the right reasons. When you have all the ingredients, it's like a cooking recipe. If the ingredients are missing, all these concepts that I'm giving you, then most likely the attack that you have will fail. The next concept is some misconception that I see about an attack in chess. You don't have to mate. An attack doesn't have to mate to checkmate the opposite king. You can attack because you're winning the bishop pair, because you're winning a pawn. This is an attack as well. An attack doesn't have to be made. And here, for instance, with white, that is in advance in development, because white already castled. This bishop is amazing. Pieces are developed. The only piece really that is not developed is this one. He's really far from castling. The king is in the center. What do we do when the king is in the center? We strike. We rip his head off, right? So that's the reason why you're allowed to play this kind of moves. Sacrificing the bishop. When he takes, now there is a check. attacking also the knight. The king is forced to move or putting the bishop in front, and you take the knight. And your attack was simply to win the pawn that was here. It doesn't have to be a mate. It's enough to win a game to just be a pawn up. The next concept is to explain that an attack could be just taking an open file, taking a diagonal. It doesn't have to be mate again. But in this one, for instance, I see a lot of people who just would launch an attack with h4. I don't see the point because, well, you could go with g4 and h5, but it's very well guarded, and I don't think this attack could result in anything good for you. Because, for instance, when he plays h4, now he's going to defend by playing rook c8, and he's taking control. He's not letting you take control of the c file, and we already messed up with white. Instead, what we should do, instead of playing this move, what we should have done is understanding that doubling the rooks, taking control on the c file, now he cannot come on c8. It's an attack. You're infiltrating on the next move. Even if he comes with the queen, for instance, to be able to play this move next, he's not going to have time because you just infiltrate with your rook, attacking the queen and the pawn. So sometimes an attack is just taking space, taking a diagonal, a column, a file that is open. You shouldn't move your pawns in the center, advance your pawns when your king is still in the center and you are underdeveloped. Try to not move the pawn structure that is in the center of the board. For instance, here, black decided to attack a pawn on d4, like this, and instead of defending it by playing just a move, like bishop e3, white decided to push this pawn instead, thinking he cannot take the pawn, otherwise I can just attack both pieces by playing queen f2. Knight take d4, queen f2, attacking both pieces. He's going to play knight h5. And your whole point was to take the knight. But just after bishop c5, look what's happening. This queen is trapped. This queen doesn't have any square to go to. White decided to push in the center here. Instead of just playing a move like bishop e3, most likely long castling, the knight will come to h3, and one day g4 would have been a nice plan. When you have a lead in development like here, this king is still in the center, you castled, all pieces are developed, apart from this bishop, but it doesn't really matter. Look at these pieces. They're all on the back rank. And usually when this happens and the king is in the center, you have to open the center. That's the reason why the best move here is to push. So we're asking this pawn to open the e file for us. Because when the pawn is going to take, you can use your rooks to give a check, and you have this amazing file. If he tries to cover with the bishop, now you have another move, which is queen b4, and no, the bishop cannot take because there is a pin. And you're threatening checkmate on the next move by queen takes bishop. Even if he thinks, your opponent, that he has like some tricks, because right now he does this. If you take with the pawn, now this one is not pinned anymore, which means he can take the queen. Well, queen takes b7, attacking the rook. Then he takes the knight. You check. He comes here. You take the knight, takes back, and the rook takes. And this is going to be checkmate on the next move. The reason why this happened is just because you managed to open the position with a move like f4 and using the rook to your advantage. And putting pressure on his pieces like this. You take, check, he covers, you take the knight. When he takes, is already over. And the reason why this happened, by the way, the reason why black totally messed up their development, they decided to go and take a pawn on the queen side instead of playing moves like this and castling and putting their king safe. So next time, when someone does this against you, open the center like this and bring your pieces to the center, attack him this way. The next concept is when you have the opportunity to get a pawn outpost in your position in the center, you should always have it. So for instance, here what happened is knight d2 that white played, and now black decided to take the knight in the center this way, which is a bad move. And the reason is, should you take with the bishop or with the pawn? Always try, if you want to launch an attack against this king, always try to have a pawn outpost. It can seem weird to actually take with the pawn because you're blocking the bishop, but it doesn't matter. Because in this kind of situation, when the pawn is on e5, you want to play on this side of the board, and I'm going to show you what happens. Why is this pawn actually super strong? Because you see this knight that was here, this knight was guarding a very important square on h7. But now this knight is forced to go on the other side of the board, which means you're going to use all possible means to bring your pieces to the king side, Knight f3, he's going to go knight c5, and now you're ready to launch the attack. Check, sacrifice the bishop. When he takes, now there is knight g5, check. Again, if the bishop takes, you just take with the pawn. Now you're opening this column for the rook. Obviously, if the king comes to g6, there's going to be queen h5. The king is going to come to f5. Then you're going to push the pawn, and this is going to lead to checkmate. If he plays a move like king g8, you just infiltrate with the queen this way, and this is going to be checkmate very quickly on h7, okay? And if he takes here, you take with the pawn. Even if he tries, this is a threat of checkmate on the next move. Even if he plays this, you close the door. This pawn controls both. But all this happened here because this guy messed up by taking your knight in the center. You took with the pawn. This knight is here. He's not here anymore. So you went h4, boom, and you're ready to sacrifice the bishop. Okay, so always try to create a pawn outpost before launching an attack. The next concept is about which side you should be focusing your attack on. And usually, the most advanced pawn, for instance for black here, this is the most advanced pawn. This pawn decides which side of the board you should be focusing your attack. Here black, this is a King's Indian, should play this way and pushing their pawns on the king side because this pawn that is the most advanced is on the king side. Now white's pawn that is the most advanced is on the queen side, so they should be focusing playing this kind of moves and rook b1. You go knight h7, they push, they play on the queen side, and you do the same but on the opposite side because your pawn that was the most advanced was on that side. So next time, look at the most advanced pawn in your position and attack on that side. This one is a crucial concept. You have to exchange off the key defenders in your opponent's position before launching an attack. Here, for instance, the best move, he has two rooks, but the rooks can only come to h7. They cannot come to h8, for instance, because of this bishop, which reduces this bishop, is really protecting actually this king. And there is not much that white can do against it. So the best way is to exchange off. This is the best move in this position, trying to exchange the only defense of this king. When the bishop is gone, it's very easy now for white to attack. For instance, the queen is going to come here. Now you attack the queen comes here, and just a single move, because this wouldn't be checkmate, bringing the rooks like this on these two squares, because the king could escape. So all you have to do is just play a move like queen e7, and the queen controls this square, which means white will checkmate in two moves by bringing the two rooks here, because the king will be trapped. The only way to defend their position for black is to give up the queen for the rook, which is still totally winning. If they don't, let's say they play a move like this, all you have to do is check. The king comes here, checkmate. This is again a very crucial concept. If you have the initiative, which means if you have a dynamic position, if your opponent has weaknesses and you are better, you have the initiative, you're the one attacking, avoid exchanging pieces. For instance, black here, and they were right to do this, they decided to play this move. Queen g7. They would love to exchange queens to reduce the weakness of this king. Without the queens on the board, this king is doing okay. But with the queens, it changes everything. That's the reason why here you should never exchange queens. Instead, you want to think about this kind of maneuver with the rook and putting pressure. You want to go to queen f3. He's going to try to take the column. And now you come queen c6. You put pressure on this one. You also put pressure on b6. He has to exchange the rooks here. Now this pawn is attacked. You see how this queen is super passive. It would have been a disaster to actually exchange it. He defends, and now all you have to do is bring the rook. And there is this threat winning the queen, obviously because of the pin, but also moves like queen c7, attacking the rook and attacking the pawn. This position is totally winning for white. The only thing you have to do when you have the advantage, don't exchange pieces as much as you can. The next concept is about finding the weakness, the main weakness of your opponent. Once you find it, you want to focus all your pieces and put pressure on that weakness as much as possible without rushing too much. For instance, here, you're playing with white, you have 2 rooks on this file. This is a very big weakness on h7. So, but this is not enough. You cannot take because, well, you're going to lose a rook. So you should, now that you found the weakness, now you have to increase pressure and you play this move. And now you have 3 pieces attacking h7 and nobody can actually defend it. But then, for instance, he plays b4. Do not rush. For instance, this pawn is yours. He's not going to be able to defend it on the next move. Why should you take straight away? No, continue to put pressure. Bring all your army if you can. For instance, these 2 pieces are not in the game. They're not playing. So the best move in this situation is to bring the knight in the center, attacking the queen and adding a little bit more pressure. You need to build up the pressure and then release it, but at the right time. Taking material here, the pawn on h7 wasn't the solution. So he's going to take it. He cannot allow to have a knight like this in the center. But now look what happens. We're not taking here. We're taking there. If he moves the bishop, now you're taking here, which would be a disaster. So he decides to take a pawn, but we take. He takes, but now all we have to do in this position is just cut the king. You come with the king here. You're controlling his exit. You're trying to checkmate on the next move by playing this. And you see, you got rid of his bishop that was here because the bishop would have controlled this square. You got rid of it by playing this move, knight e5. So you see, this knight, this exchange against this defender that we saw, for instance, in the other concept as well, getting rid of the defender, the bishop that was here, was crucial by playing this kind of move. He took, and now you can take. You got rid of the defender, and now what can he do? He can bring the knight, because that's the only move to try and come here if you try to checkmate, but you just take it. And that's a total disaster for white, for black, that is totally losing. This concept happens in an endgame. You can also attack in an endgame, right? For instance, here, with both rooks, you're attacking here, but it's very well defended. And usually what you have to do is that you have to create what we call a second weakness. You have to attack the other side of the board. Once you're done with one side, you transfer your pieces and you try to create a second weakness. This is what usually makes you win. Here, for instance, the best move is, okay, I'm done on this file. I go to the other side. I transfer my pieces because now these rooks are occupied basically with this pawn. So I can put pressure on the other side because they're not there. Even if he protects, I just play this. Now I put pressure on this. He could attack my pawn. Yes, it's true. On g4, I defend it. And now he has this problem. You're attacking this pawn. The only move is to come back with the rook. But now all you have to do is just take. You created the second weakness because this pawn is yours. I can show you how it can go. He's going to attack your pawn. You take, he takes, take, the f6 pawn falls. This one. It falls as well. And it would be 4 pawns against 2. This endgame that is totally winning for white. The only thing that happened here is if you tried, for instance, to bring the king, push the pawn, etc., it wouldn't have yielded anything. And most likely this position would have been a draw. Instead, he understood he has to create a second weakness. He has to go for this and this. Create a second weakness. It works so well in chess. The next concept is about timing. Timing is crucial for an attack. For instance, here, Alekhine, who's one of the greatest attackers that we had, is playing with the white pieces. And the way that he played this game is absolutely amazing. It's a case study on how to play an attack. For instance, here he just went queen d2. His opponent decided to play bishop d7, and the first thing that came to his mind is, why did he play this, the guy? Okay, he wants to castle long and put a rook here, which would put pressure on my queen. What do you do in an attack? You first stop the plan of your opponent before continuing yours. This is exactly what he did. Everybody would have just castled here, but no, he played this amazing move. And now black cannot castle. because otherwise the queen would take the pawn. This is the whole point here. He stopped the plan. In chess, you have to stop his plan before starting your attack. And then he went with long castle. And now every move is just art, pure art. He attacks the queen moves. He attacks the knight. Now his opponent had a little trick. He thought, okay, he cannot take the knight because otherwise the queen is gone. He brings the last piece. He brings the last piece into play. His opponent does the same, and now he pushes the pawn. The queen moves, and now he brings the queen to the king side because yes, he's going for this king. The knight moves and push the pawn again. The queen has to retreat, and you see how just after 5-6 moves, how this position became a total nightmare. Look at this. He takes a piece, exchange rooks, and now he doesn't take this piece back. Because this is what happens. When the position actually is ready for an attack, you have a lot of tactical motives that happen. And here he found pawn takes pawn attacking the queen. The pawn is attacking the queen. Check. He went here. And now queen e8. He pushed the pawn again. All he did, he stopped the plan that black had to not let them long castle. He forced the guy to go short castle. And now he was ready to just push the pawns as much as he can. By the way, when your opponent does something like this, you have to be careful even when you have an attack. Don't blunder. Blundering is most likely below 2000 the main reason why we lose a lot of points and we lose games. Okay? For instance, here if you take, you lose the game because it's checkmate in one move. Yeah? And we would hate our life if this happens. So when your opponent, there is very rare in chess that your opponent doesn't have any resources that can save him. Remember this, it's very rare. So when you're launching an attack, focus, make sure he doesn't have counterattacks. Here, for instance, just king e1 and the position is totally lost because you're gonna win this, trying to fork both, and there is no way he can defend this. He can push the pawn, you push, and this is a check. Yeah. He covers with the rook. Now you go here. You're trying to go to f8. He comes here, sacrifice, the queen takes, and now all you have to do is just take the rook because this one is pinned. So this is basically a checkmate because the bishop is forced to take, and Alekhine won like this, a crazy game. The next concept is when you have the bishop pair, try to not exchange it. Try to keep your bishop pair, especially in open positions like this, with amazing diagonals. And the way that it goes usually when we have the bishop pair is that we have to push the pawns in the center to open even more lines. And this is what happened in this game. He went f4, the knight moved. He pushed the other pawn, a little bit like in the game that I just showed you with Alekhine. c5, it's okay. Now he came with the queen here because he had a battery and trying to take the pawn on f7. The queen is going to protect. He moves the knight, so the queen protects this pawn. But this is not enough. I told you, 2 pawns that you push when you have the bishop pair are really powerful. And here there is no defense. Exchange queens, take the pawn, threatening basically to push with discovery check and winning the whole house. The king moves, bishop here, and the rook infiltrates with the bishop that attacks g7. And this position is totally winning for white. So make sure you playing a sort of combo between the bishop pair and pushing your pawns in the center to open more lines. Don't give one of your bishop. Keep both in open positions. Give your bishops in closed positions. An attack can happen, like I said before, in a very simplified endgame as well. For instance, here, the attack becomes putting the king in the center as fast as possible, and your king becomes the attacker. I see a lot of people trying to play moves like this, and wasting time, and then the king can come in the center. You don't want this. Now, this one is very close to the center, this one is very far. We're going to use this to our advantage. What we're going to do, we're going for this pawn, because this one is too far. And your king can become an attacker in the endgame. Because like this, and he cannot protect the pawn, and the second pawn. All white has to do after is push his pawns and win. Okay? So in very simplified endgames with one minor piece, for instance, etc., your king becomes the attacker. Centralize your king. All right. So the next concept is don't destroy your positional advantage like white has here just because we try to keep a piece closer to the enemy king this way. So for instance here, white decided to play queen d3, which is interesting. I'm not saying it's a bad move. But here, first of all, you're getting triple pinned now. I don't think that was necessary. And yes, we kind of give concessions in our positions strategically just because we want to keep our pieces very close to his king. We want to attack. We shouldn't do this. Here, for instance, instead of queen d3, first you could have played knight c3, or you could have pushed the pawn on a4 and take this way. But usually what we try to do is that, okay, I need to bring my queen into the attack. But to be honest, there is no way to actually attack this king right now. And this queen is totally useless here. And yeah, this is kind of scary. And there is some tactics straight away, taking the pawn. Because now the queen cannot take, otherwise you lose the knight. And if you take with this knight, now there is this. And this is a fork. And there is no way to save. Even if you attack the queen this way, the queen moves, attacking the knight. And you give a check because you saw you can take the bishop. But he takes this knight at the end. And you ended up just messing up the position just because you try to bring the pieces out too quickly. And the last concept that I want to speak about is that there are certain openings that are ideal to have strong attacks. For instance, openings that start with e4 bring way more tactic. Openings that start with d4 are more positional. For instance, the kind of positions that bring more attack are going to be gambits. For instance, the Mora gambit, like this, and you sacrifice this pawn. You go with this just because you want to open lines, the C and the D file, and you develop a piece. This can lead to quite tactical positions where, yes, white is giving up a pawn and he's going to get an advantage for it. But it's not played really at the top level because we know that gambits usually don't work. Usually they don't. With good play, it's not justified to actually sacrifice this way a pawn. Even in the king's gambit, for instance, if you go e4, e5, and f4, and your opponent takes, and you go knight f3, and he's going to go g5, in this opening, white gave a pawn, and usually the king's gambit is not very good. Black is going to find a way to equalize or be better in main positions. But it's going to be tactical. For attacking players, this kind of openings, yes, it's good for white. Okay, because it's going to be dynamic. It's not going to be positional. All right, so certain openings, for instance, if you play the London and you play d4, the guy plays d5 and you go bishop f4, this kind of openings are going to be way less tactical. e3, because you have less lines that are open. The pieces, the way they are placed, is just going to be less attacks in general. It's more going to be about maneuvering the pieces, putting them on optimal squares, etc. I hope that you're going to crush your next attack. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.